on Nova Legends podcast. I have ESPN's TJ Quinn back with me for a third time. Two of the best interviews I've ever done, not because of me, but because of TJ. If you get a chance, check them out. He knows so much about sports, and his journey is fascinating. TJ is an '86 graduate of West Potomac High School, local in Northern Virginia, and he was from Fort Hunt, a great school with a proud tradition that merged with Groveton and then went over to Groveton's building at West Po. He played some football there, safety. Wasn't quite good enough to play college football. Danny Meyer tried, but ended up at Missouri, studied journalism, had a great career, has done interesting things, a little bit of politics, worked for the Bergen Record in New Jersey, then at the iconic Daily News covering baseball. Who wouldn't want to do that? And since 2007, he's been at ESPN, the Enterprise Unit. He's done work on the Balco case, Brittany Griner, lots of fun stuff. TJ, did I get all that right?
Mostly. The important correction is I was an outside linebacker, not a safety.
Oh, gotcha.
And also, Danny Meyer once said to me, the perfect compliment you can give somebody that you'll never be called on. He said, now I was in high school, I played at 5'9", 165. Um, he said, if you were 6'3", you could play anywhere in the country,
Exactly.
which was a wonderful thing to say and was never going to happen. So yeah, rather than push it at D3 or NAIA, was not good enough. Hey, that speaks for itself. That's an evaluation you made, and I'll respect your ability to make it. But I just want to be appreciated as a mediocre linebacker as opposed to a mediocre safety.
Exactly. Well, one thing about Coach Meyer's statement is it can't be disproven. So
Exactly.
that's a very wise thing for Coach Meyer. And I think I told you last time I've interviewed him, and just a great story. Played for Lou Holtz at NC State, and just a lot of funny stories. But look, TJ, I wasn't going to start here, but we got news. We got breaking news. So have you ever covered any gambling stories in your career?
Sort of. Excuse me. I did. I mean, I've done a fair amount on Pete Rose.
Okay,
Um,
that's a lot.
so that's some gambling. Different in the sense that it was one guy in a professional sport as opposed to the. I'm sorry, just I mean, that wasn't anything but a catastrophe for college sports about what you see now. All these schools connected to point shaving. We're back to 1951 with CCNY and a major scandal that that then was all mob driven. But yeah, so I've had some experience with it. I've got some colleagues now who are doing much more with it directly related to the current era. But it's just one of those issues that never goes away.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're still having to get money through gambling because they are getting paid through NIL deals now. So you'd figure maybe they wouldn't need to, but maybe they're not mutually exclusive. Why do you think we care so much about gambling? It kept Pete Rose out of the hall. Of all the things going on in the world, Cash Patel got involved in the press conference when they announced Chauncey Billups and the poker and the NBA gambling that went on, the announcement last year. But why do we care so much about gambling in sports?
It goes straight to the question of can you believe what you're seeing on the field? And that's people, I think today have a general notion that something happened in baseball more than 100 years ago. I don't think, people really appreciate what people refer to as the Black Sox scandal of 1919 really meant to this country. First of all, baseball was the sport. Football really was a college sport that wasn't even growing yet, or just about to explode. Um, it was baseball and boxing and horse racing, and there was extensive gambling on all of it. And you had gamblers who paid off the 1919 Chicago White Sox, who were by far the heavy favorites, to throw the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. Some people know those basics, but it was such, I mean, the power of it. Anybody who's read The Great Gatsby, the character, the very anti-Semitic character of Meyer Wolfsheim, is supposed to be Hyman Rothstein, the
Oh, wow.
legendary gambler. It's and talking about playing with the faith of millions of a nation because you couldn't trust what you watched on the field. And sports, we have always, any society that values sport, which would be all of them, um, part of what it's supposed to be a reflection of who you are as a people. It's supposed to be a reflection of your values. And so if your value is fair play and competition, gambling cuts to all of it. So it cuts to the integrity of the product if you're someone who's selling it. It cuts to the sense of a nation's identity. And I'm not, I mean, that may sound like kind of an overblown statement, but I'll stand by it. I mean, that's why sports are so important. It's the ultimate expression of identity, of tribalism, of community. Um, that's, you think, I gave this comparison in a speech I gave one time at University of Connecticut, where how powerful that identity is through sport. Like think about when they said Pluto is no longer a planet, right? People lost their minds because it's something we've grown to believe. How can you say Pluto's not a planet? What does that have to do with anybody's lives, right? It just, and it again, it's going to seem like kind of a very tangential point I'm making, but it's when we have an identity, when we think we know what the world is, we're locked into that. And so now we go to sports, and now we go to something where my kids have a choice if they're Yankees fans or Mets fans. They could be whatever. They, God help them, they were raised as Mets fans, just like I was, which is a lifetime of mostly of pain and misery. They have the choice to get out anytime. They can root for any other team. They could root for the Dodgers or the Yankees or whatever, but they don't. That identity is so crucial. So this may seem like a long way around to go to make this point, but that when you have that kind of connection to sports and what they mean to you, the question of whether what you're seeing is real is essential. So look, gambling exploded ever since that decision. The Supreme Court said that you couldn't just restrict sports gambling to Las Vegas and Atlantic City, to Nevada and New Jersey. There's too much money in it for people to say no. So ESPN got into the business, and Major League Baseball and the NFL and everybody, with people not thinking so much about what the consequences could be or thinking we can kind of deal with it. And now we're back at a place where you've got scandals that have affected baseball, the NBA, NCAA. It's coming for anybody else. If somebody's betting on it, somebody's trying to cheat. And it's this is not going to be the end of the problem. This is one more step in what's going to be, I think, kind of an ugly reckoning for where we are.
Yeah. Well, I think it probably has something to do with the fact that it's so easy to bet on these phones, that it's and all the players have access to the same phones and accounts, that we have. Do you think if they made certain bets illegal, like prop bets, where one person if he doesn't get 10 rebounds, there's a payout, and maybe instead of a point spread, just have a line. A team is 3-1 underdogs. Would you be up for changing the way changing which bets are allowed if it can make the games more legitimate?
I mean, I try not to answer things in terms of what I think is best because I think if I have any good qualities as a journalist, it starts with knowing what I know and what I don't. But
Yeah.
I know that that's the first place people look is start with the prop bets. And anyone who's been to a game, I mean, I hate it that if I go to a Knicks game, half of what I hear the crowd yelling is, like, come on, Jalen, I need one more rebound. I need one more rebound. It's, that's what's driving so many of the fans. It's driving so much of their engagement with the players. Gambling has always been around.
Mm.
Just a couple months ago, I was going through new FBI files on Pete Rose that some colleagues and I had gotten. It's always been around. It's not too hard to find a bookie, but the way it's so easy now, and the when people say that, well, people are going to bet no matter what. At least now it's legal. I'm sorry, when you have billions of dollars of advertising pushing gambling, it gets it into people's heads. So of course there's more of it. Um, if you limit the prop bets, it's those little things that are so hard to regulate. It's hard to, if somebody's going to miss a shot, at a certain point, some of these parlays that people do are so, are so specific. Are those people then going to run off to illegal bookies and still do the same thing? Probably not. No, because you've got this huge crowd that does do it legally. If those bets are not available, it's going to help with some of those problems. I'm not saying ban gambling. I'm not a Puritan. I don't gamble myself. Just because I know you know, people like to overlook the odds. It's a very human thing. That's why we have a Vegas. You never beat the house, but we like to think we do. People are going to kid themselves about, I don't know, the consequences that they face, that the game faces. Um, so I don't know if little tweaks like that will solve the problems that we've got. Um, but I think they kind of rushed into it, just seeing how much money was available for these sponsorship deals without thinking what the consequences were. So to me, that's a good place to start. I think another way, like look at baseball, for example. They avoided any real major scandals from 1920 up until Pete Rose. I mean,
Yeah.
there were little things here and there about guys, but nothing big came up in part because of how much they were on top of it. Every year, FBI agents would go and speak to the teams about gambling. It was the rule in baseball. And so because they prioritized it, because they made it so clear with the players, this is the one rule you absolutely cannot violate. You're going to have exceptions like Pete Rose, but they are the exceptions. And what you're seeing now is it is so widespread, and I think education has something to do with it. Um, Anybody who gets caught in some kind of game fixing scandal, what they started with was a belief that I'm too smart to get caught. Um, there needs to be better education. That needs to be part of it as well to the people inside the game because the temptation is just overwhelming.
Yeah. It's for sure. When you mentioned the gambling sites, the money they spend on advertising is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But the data they have on their gamblers, Michael Lewis has a great podcast on gambling against the rules, like season 3. And they know how to spot a winning gambler before he even thinks about winning. Like they can tell the way you bet whether or not you can win, and then they reduce your bet. At least the bookies of our youth, they took a chance. They would take your bet whether or not you could beat them or not. And I think these big companies now, they're greedy. They advertise a lot. They get a lot of people hooked on gambling, and then they really make it so you can't win. So it's really gambling's in a really bad place right now on a lot of levels. Do you see any with Chelsea Billups, there was card playing involved as well, and here is a Chinese basketball league. Is that probably just a function of the people that were involved? Those are the games they're involved in, or do you think all these gambling type, all these sports and gambling types of propositions are all kind of related in some way?
I, I think it's all kind of tied in. I mean, you've got, I had investigators tell me years ago before all this really blew up and before we were in the age of AI and legal, bookmaking, that one of the things they were really concerned about was infiltration of gamblers into lower level leagues in the US. Um, you've got massive Asian markets. And there was some evidence that they were starting to get really interested in things like MLS in this country um, because they were looking for things that stayed under the radar. And like a lot of the corruption, I've spoken to a number of experts about this, particularly in Europe, Asia. Um, the scandals that they have, again, tend to be at those lower levels. For one thing, the players at those levels don't make nearly as much money, so it's going to be a lot easier to get them to say, well, okay, I'll take a risk because I actually need the money. It's a lot tougher to bribe a guy who's making a 9-figure salary than it is somebody who's making 5 figures. Um, so there's that element where people always just looked, what's the easiest area to exploit? Um, so you've got athletes who are easier to exploit in leagues that few people are watching or paying attention to. So it's so much easier to stay under the radar. Now, because of our devices, because of algorithms, because of the internet, we're so interconnected. Anybody can bet on anything, anywhere. And if there's an opportunity for somebody to cheat, they're going to find it and do it. I mean, add that to the fact that players, any professional athlete I've met, any elite athlete I've met, these are the most competitive people I've ever met in my life. Like I always remember I don't remember if you and I discussed this previously or not, but in the late 70s, early 80s, my dad was the benefits director for the NFL Players Association. And he had to go around to all the teams every year and explain to the guys their benefits and strategies and things. And it was tough to get attendance at these meetings. You know, these guys are trying to keep their jobs as professional football players and now have to go listen to some financial, lecture. And so what he did was tell the player representatives, whoever gets the most guys is going to win a pair of Tony Lama boots, right? It's just a pair of cowboy boots that any of these guys could, buy 1,000 times over without thinking twice, but it was a competition. And he said they were pulling guys out of the ice bath, out of the hot tub. They were pulling guys out of the training room because it was just about winning. Mm. And so a lot of these guys do gamble. Sometimes it's just card games on the team flight or in the clubhouse. The stories I've heard over the years about how competitive they get. One of my favorite quotes, he's still alive, so I can't say it, but one player who had a terrific gift for winning at cards. All his teammates one day suddenly all accused him of cheating. He goes, "All right, you guys say I cheat, but I win, don't I?" I mean, that was his defense. So a guy like Chauncey, which look, it really shocked me. I've spent a little bit of time with him. He's a terrific guy. Anybody who's dealt with him, he's very smart, thoughtful player. How does somebody like that get caught up in something like this? Something happens to the brain. Something about the competition. Something about as an athlete, you are trained to take risks. You are trained to trust yourself and your instincts, and it gets people into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's really it's coming to a head right now. Well, let's go to college sports. We're talking about money. We're in the middle of January and we're still talking about college football. When we were growing up, we had 5 or 6 prestigious conferences in football. They'd have bowl games. At the end of the bowl games, it might not make sense who's the champion, but writers like yourself and then coaches, I guess, would vote, and then we'd have a champion. It was a very different time, but it made sense. The bowl games were everything. Is it still college sports today the way it is today? I mean, I don't think it was ever as innocent as we probably thought it was when we were young, but are we in such a different place right now? It's not even college sports anymore.
It's not in the sense that we thought it was. I mean, with a couple of caveats. One, like you said just now, I mean, it was never pure, right? We had an idea of what it was, and it's supposed to be all things, it's about school. That's what we call them, student athletes. I think it took SMU to really kind of blow that up. The fact was, these guys have been paid under the table forever. Not with the kind of money we're talking now. Back in the days when it was a car for your mom with kind of a shady deal through a local used car dealership who was a booster, and
Good
everybody,
old days.
the good old days. Yeah, everybody knew that game, and people could kind of live with it. But we live with a certain amount of corruption in this society or any society that we just decide is okay. It's as long as it doesn't seem too egregious, and as long as you feel like your team has an opportunity to be as corrupt as somebody else's, then you're happy, right? If it's the other coach doing it, he's a cheating SOB. If it's your coach, well, then he's enterprising and just trying to keep up with everybody else. Yeah. And so we actually have a pretty decent tolerance for some basic level of corruption, I think. Um, but what happened was, it was again, I don't know if anybody I work for will see this or not, but it is ESPN and other networks and the expansion of, the availability of these. There were a few games you could watch on Saturdays on the network TV, and that was it. And now it is feels like 24 hours a day. You can watch college sports. There's so much money in it. And then when you saw the gaps between, all this money, going to coaches, where pretty much every state, the highest paid state employee is the head football coach at the flagship university. Um, that's something that people seem okay with and are content to live with. But the disparity got so great that it just became obvious. How is it that the players are not professionals? Everything else about their lives is professional. They're told what classes to take. They're told, to put, at least at the high end, to take, to put their sport above everything else. This was really fascinating to me. I don't have his permission to share his name, but I've got a relative who is a lacrosse legend, absolute legend, was four-time first team All-American in school, is in the Hall of Fame. Um, People who know me know exactly who I'm talking about. But when his sons uh, came of age and could have played anywhere in the country, he told them to go D3. He said, because you want to have a life, you want to have that balance. So we treat them like employees. They have expectations like employees, and it just became kind of irreconcilable about how are they the only ones who are not taking part of this. So, you know, it's not college football or even college sports generally the way we grew up with it. But on the other hand, it was a change I think that was inevitable. Um, I got to tell you, a lot of the criticism that I hear about it. Um, yeah, look, we just had the whole thing with Lane Kiffin and what happened with Ole Miss, and how many people out there were rooting for Ole Miss just because they want to see it kind of stick it to Lane Kiffin. People don't get nearly as upset about that. That doesn't get members of Congress talking too much about introducing legislation the way they have with players switching teams. And so much of that has to do with, I think, a large number of people believe that if you are a pro athlete or D1 college athlete or elite, you are lucky and that you owe everything to everybody else. Forget the fact that, how hard it is to get to that level, how much work that it takes. But we don't treat musicians that way. We don't treat artists that way. I mean, my youngest son is a music student. He's very talented. Does anybody care if he's making money off a gig, at a club or a bar? Is that somehow, damaging the sanctity of his status as a student? No, he's a talented musician. Let him go out and ply his trade. And if he's able to sign a record deal and, buy his family a beach house someplace, terrific. Which is not on the table at the moment. But it is a separate thing that we have for athletes that you need to be grateful, you need to be lucky, you need to be humble. Um, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it because then I'll get in real trouble. But there is something political about it. And there is, the idea that if you're an athlete who is not content to take a scholarship as the full extent of your compensation, that if you're willing to leave a school and go explore where you can get something else, that somehow you're unworthy or ungrateful. And that's something I reject deeply.
Yeah. Well, it is evening things up, at least for now. You kind of talked around this, but in pro sports, which you're probably most used to covering, we have salary caps. We have rules in place to deal with all this money that goes to young athletes. The interesting thing about college is these things are just evolving. So a lot of things are that they're throwing money around and doesn't make a lot of sense right now. Like first year players are making $500,000 in basketball and sit in the bench. I know a kid who just transferred to I think USC, made $3 million as junior year in high school. And so, do you think some of the some of these rules in professional sports were kind of learned, on the job or from trial and error. Do you think that kind of experience is needed for NIL and the portal and all these changes to college sports?
Um, I don't know if it's needed, but it's inevitable. I mean, yeah, people forget pretty quickly just how rough the path was to get to some kind of economic stability in pro sports. I mean, when baseball created a union in the 60s, there was huge pushback to that. Again, same thing. People, it took someone like Curt Flood to sit out. It took, Messersmith and McNally, these athletes who were willing to say, this system is wrong. When uh, Curt Flood used the term, I mean, you couldn't use the terminology today, but at the time when he described it as essentially being a high-paid slave, there was an egregiousness to the control that the owners had over the players. I know from my dad, like I said, having worked for the union, people can decide if that means I have a bias or not, whatever. But what I can tell you is that he used to sit in some meetings, and the things you would hear from owners about players, like means, they clearly thought of them as chattel as well. And it took some nasty fights and work stoppages to get to the point where we are. And you're still, baseball is about to go through a new collective bargaining process, and there could be a stoppage. It's not like they've solved it; they've avoided one for a long time. But with college, you've got, all right. So take those leagues, right, that were smaller than, and you just had a group of owners, fewer than 30 in each league when the unions were established. Um, Now you've got to try to come up with a system that affects hundreds of colleges, all different levels, all different parts of the country. This is, comparing University of Alabama to Fairleigh Dickinson, which is right down the road, from me. That is not apples to apples. You can't do things like revenue sharing. But let's not forget that the NCAA had years to prepare for this, and that rather than try to come up with some sort of framework, they just fought and fought and fought until they lost. And now all of a sudden, as like people like to say, it's the Wild West. So some of this was preventable. You could have had structures in place. You had plenty of, pretty much all these schools have economics departments. You could have had somebody, come to the president's office and get in their ear and say, this is what we need to be prepared for. It is going to be an absolute mess. You had the House versus, the settlement, with the House versus NCAA.
For the roster sizes, for the
Yeah,
roster
what was
sizes
that in
thing?
June?
Yeah.
That allows the schools to pay players directly. Um, that's why I saw guys like Nick Saban decide, I'm done. I cannot navigate this world. Of course, Nick's also, what is he now, 74, I think.
Oh, wow. That's
So give
great.
him some credit. But you know, the landscape is such a mess. It's not just about NIL and about paying players. Let's also look at revenue sources. And I try to bring things back to like a fan's perspective as best I can. You've got, okay, yeah, we've got players shifting around all over the place, but we also have a media landscape where I never know what network a game is going to be on, or if it's going to be on a streaming service, or if I have that streaming service, or if the connection is going to be any good, or if the broadcast is going to be any good. We don't know where the games are going to be all the time. You've got constant, shifting in the contracts that rights holders like, my own beloved employer, ESPN, signs. Nobody knows the landscape. Nobody knows where it's coming from. How do you divide up that money? Where's the money coming from? Um, it is a mess. It will balance out eventually, as all things do. Sometimes, in ugly ways. Um, so the one thing that they could have done to try to prevent the madness, which is have a structure in place where the NCAA, could have said, here's how it's going to work. And I don't know what the best system would have been, but They could have had a system to work from, but instead they didn't.
Mm.
And so now, yeah, it is an absolute mess. But on the other hand, as a fan, um, there's a great product out there right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the college football playoff, personally, I don't want to see it expand to more than 12. Um, but there have been some terrific games. I mean, the ratings are solid. People are enjoying it. You get a kid like like Mendoza at Indiana. Some of these incredible stories. So something's still working. People are still buying it.
Yeah.
Um, and so much of the sturm and drang about what a disaster everything is from people, I think, anticipating or projecting that it's going to get worse or it's going to get messier.
Mm.
It doesn't really affect me that much if, you know, do I have the same connection to Missouri football? If the players are changing, we're rooting for the uniforms. Like Jerry Seinfeld said, we're rooting for laundry. Um, you have to, it changes the way you look at it, but I love baseball as much as I ever did. And they said free agency was going to destroy that. Um, you know, it's people adjust to whatever a new normal is.
Yeah. It is. It was interesting though. As a UVA guy, we didn't quite get in, so we were happy to go to a bowl game because we don't. It doesn't happen to us, every year. Whereas Notre Dame, if you don't get in, do you really want to go to a bowl game? Do you really want to go to the Gator Bowl or whatever? So it does create a interesting dynamic at the end of the season. But I guess that was always the case. If you didn't get the bowl bid that you wanted to some degree, do you think the NCAA will survive as is, or do you think there's really no need to really call it college sports? Or maybe we need to kind of rethink of how to structure these games.
I mean, it is a good question about the relevance of the NCAA. How are they going to hold on to power? Um, the Power Five schools and the pressure that they're creating to, they've already set up their own entities. Um, it's going to change. And I haven't really heard anybody, lay out a really clear path of what it's going to look like. And it is kind of funny that, the association between the sports and the schools are so peripheral as it is. We just, we took this sport, it's basically grown into a professional sport, and now they continue to have an affiliation with these schools. Um, for football, these are the minor leagues for the NFL. For basketball, until you had the G League, but even with the G League, it's still, these are essentially the training ground for professionals. It's not about, this old idea that we had that these are students who are representing their schools to fight for glory. No, they're mercenaries. And some of them do it because they love where they're going. But, uh, to me, the mistake is to hang on to this old idea that things were great before, that there was something pure about it. There was never anything pure about it. And the fact was that the players were the ones who were doing all the work and not sharing in what was going on. This is the country has shifted to a point where I think most people see that this is more equitable. It's more fair to these guys. They deserve a chance to capitalize on whatever value they bring. Um, I don't know how it's going to shake out. I, I don't know what the relevance of the NCAA as an organization is going to be at some time. I mean, it's gonna kind of splinter, but it's also look at the way people were trying to predict what was going to happen with television, right? Where linear cable, I mean, shows that go right onto cable TV, like ESPN, um, that everyone was going to start buying they weren't going to buy from cable companies anymore. They were cutting the cord. Now it's going to be you go out and select your own thing, what they call over-the-top programming. Um, and now we're getting back to where everything's bundled again. We just found a new way to package, the system we thought we were destroying. Is that what's going to happen with college sports, where we just find some new way to present it? I don't know. It's just that there is so much money available now between the TV contracts and the gambling and everything else. Um, And by gambling, I mean the rights deals that leagues are signing with organizations, the sponsorship deals. There is so much money that it's going to keep changing to try to find new revenue. And uh, I mean, who's being hurt in this in some ways? In a lot of ways, it's mostly just our sensibilities and what we think about these sports.
Yeah.
What's really changed? Do I care that Missouri's going to have its fourth quarterback in 3 years? Well, if the guy can make some third down completions, I don't really care. I may not get to watch him for 4 years, but whatever. It's more just kind of letting go of my idea of what I thought it was supposed to be when I was 14.
Yeah.
Um, than any, the problems as they exist are confusion. Um, Again, gambling is its own thing. That's a mess right now. But what people seem to be most upset about is just the amount of confusion that's going on, and that will settle itself.
Yeah. Well, one thing that needs to settle itself is the severances that the coaches are getting. I mean, if I could be fired and make this kind of money, it would be unbelievable. Do you have any idea what is the basis of these huge severances? Is this just their market power when they sign those deals? They're so wanted they can negotiate whatever severance clause they ask for.
That's really it. And and once you have one established, well, now the next guy wants the same thing, and the schools are still willing to pay it. I mean, you don't have, I mean, how many schools have been willing to say we are going to downsize? Um, it just doesn't happen. There's so much, I mean, there's financial capital, but there's also cultural capital in it. Who wants to be the university president to stand up to your alumni base, to your boosters, to everybody and say, we're getting out of the rat race because you're in or you're out. If you're in, you better spend the money. Um, if you're out, then you better have a fan base that is behind you, and good luck finding that.
Mm.
Um, so, um, I mean, I wish I knew what the answer was
Yeah.
for any of this, frankly. But it's, at the end of the day, I'm going to still keep rooting for the Laundry.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that there's probably more work for investigative reporting back before all this was legal. Now that it's legal, you cover it in a different way. It has to create a lot of opportunities for the media, the transfer portal. I mean, the news is fast and furious. In some ways, it's pretty interesting for journalists to cover college sports today.
It is. I mean, I don't really cover it, and if I do, it's because something has gone really wrong. Since what I do is investigative,
Right.
nobody's ever happy to hear from me.
Yeah.
Um, it's, but yeah, in terms of uh, journalism in general, I mean, yeah, there are so many stories out there. And in terms of investigative, yeah, I mean, gambling is this huge area. Anytime we as a group sit and talk about, all right, should we be working on in the coming days, the coming year, whatever, gambling's always right at the top of the list.
Interesting. Yeah.
Um, Definitely, it's I think there are much larger questions which we're free to get into if you want about just sort of the state of journalism in general and how that applies to sports. I mean, so much of what sports journalism is now, or sports media, let me say, is driven by big personalities with hot takes.
Mhm.
And then a lot of it is also what's transactional. The transactional, some of that's related to gambling. You want to know what's going on with your team, who's injured, who's not, who's going to be available. Um, like my longtime friend and colleague, Adrian Wojnarowski, Woj to most people, kind of invented, this role as someone it was all about the transactions, about making sure you had every little detail. And Adam Schefter and and now Shams and our own Jeff Passan with baseball. So much of what they do, sports media is driven by that. And look, God bless those guys. It's they've done very well at that. It's a little different than what I do. And then you've got the Stephen A. Smiths and Pat McAfee's and the Dave Portnoys and all the others. You know, there's a big range of that. And so I think there's some confusion between what's journalism and what's not.
Yeah.
Where people, all they know is that if you're a consumer right now, you've just got so much crap being thrown at you all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so where does journalism fit into that? You know, right now, ESPN still believes in what we do. They're still paying us to do what we do. Yes, we are in bed with most of these leagues, but I can tell you, you know, 100% conviction that not neither I nor any of my colleagues has ever been told you can't go after this because it's going to upset the NFL or Major League Baseball or anything. There are times where we'll say, okay, we're working on this, and the bosses, our bosses, will tell, you know, their leadership and some of our, you know, regular the people who work with those sports, the production people, this is coming so that they're prepared. But nobody's ever told us to back off. Nobody's ever told us this is untouchable. There's still a place for, you know, for real journalism, for journalism of accountability, for, you know, finding out, you know, you don't want to just say scandal for the sake of scandal, but it's where there's corruption, where there is abuse, where, you know, any of those things that we don't like, there's still, I think, very much a place for that. It's just tough, I think, for sometimes for that kind of journalism to be heard. And, you know, when you've got so much noise coming at consumers all the time.
Yeah. Well, TJ, what about you know, I kind of do the long form interview on a local level, but there's guys like Roy Firestone and Joe Buck, and there's been a lot of guys who do these kind of interviews. Do you think they'll survive, or do you think more of the shows will be like kind of Dan Patrick's, where you have lots of producers that are firing questions, and your guests come on for 8 minutes at a time, or it's like Steve Smith, where you have this massive personality that everyone cares about their takes. Do you think long form interviews like this will survive on a national level?
I don't think they'll dominate the way, you know, and we've already seen it. They just don't dominate the way they used to. Roy Firestone would sit with you for an hour,
Yeah.
and it was just you, and people would tune in, and there was also nothing else, right? There weren't.
Yeah.
It was that or
But it
radio.
was amazing.
Yeah, and you had some terrific stuff, and you know, look at my, you know, dear friend Bob Lee and what
Yeah.
he was able to do with Outside the Lines and have that kind of in depth. You don't see it on, you know, again, what we call linear TV, what's scheduled, you know, on air television. You just don't see it there because people don't have those attention spans. And most of what I see, look, I like Dan Patrick, I like Rich Eisen. What I see from their shows is the clips that I see on social media. So if that subject is on for 8 minutes, I'm going to end up seeing probably about 40 seconds of it on Instagram or something, because that's what people have an appetite for. So there will be, you know, you're here, you know, fighting a good fight. There are other, you know, podcasts obviously are huge, and you have some terrific long interviews, but they're not going to dominate. They are not going to
Yeah.
eclipse, you know, the shorter, quick hit things. If you're looking to maximize visibility and money, then the formula is pretty clear. Controversial names, hot takes,
Yeah.
quick, interesting, contentious, something like that. You know, that's what people are going to go for. Uh,
Yeah.
PBS makes a terrific nightly newscast where
Yeah.
they get deep into issues and talk to the top experts and really have time to explore it, and nobody watches it. It's
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah.
So part of it, you know, to me is this media landscape is so crazy that we're in, and everybody who owns a phone is a publisher. People will find what they want. It's just it's not going to dominate the way it used to. You know, this is going to be a niche thing.
Yeah. I got a message from Nikki Fisher last night, 2 o'clock in the morning. Nikki played on that UVA team that was undefeated briefly in 1990. Then they ended up losing to Georgia Tech, and then the season fell apart. But it's a magical year in UVA history. And I didn't know Nikki, but I was at the game, and I reached out and interviewed him, and he reached out to me yesterday. This is 3 years later. He's wanted to thank me for the discussion. And we talked about things. He said he never talked about his whole life, about his childhood and stuff. And that's what happens when you submit to questioning from a stranger. Your conversation will change for the things you always talk about, and someone will ask you questions you've never been asked before. So I really enjoy it. And Nikki was a great player, but no one's else ever asked him to do that. And I think it's interesting. And even when I interviewed you, with all the great content that we had, it's so much great content. The things that went viral, you had a clip about Caitlin Clark that went everywhere. You had two clips about Caitlin Clark. So Caitlin's name just took TJ Quinn, and it went all over the place. And just like as you said, it's the clips that we're able to put out there is what remains. And I guess that's not going to change. So
No, it's not. It's funny. I can't even remember what I said.
you said Caitlin was fierce. It's not because she's white; she's different, and you had a very nuanced take about Caitlin. I loved it, and I mean, look, she's just like the clip, just like who she is. People just they can't get enough of her, and you had a really good take about her. So
Well,
yeah,
that's all right. Good. That's good to know.
yeah,
Even if it escapes me, but
yeah,
we go for nuance here.
yeah,
Yeah, it's that's what's part of so frustrating about the current system is that the landscape that we're in is people are going to seek the controversy so that it goes viral.
yeah.
Um, to me, my measure as a journalist is um, my willingness to back away from that and go for the nuance if that is what the story is.
Mhm.
And it's why I will often take any opportunity I can to say that if I were the king of journalism for a day, first thing I would do is get rid of journalism awards because I feel like it's
The wrong incentives.
well, it's incentive to do something that's going to appeal to a judge as opposed to what is going to best, most accurately and honestly tell a story that is serving your viewership, readership. Um, I still believe in journalism as a public trust. I've got, when you graduate at the University of Missouri School of Journalism and cross the stage, they don't give you your diploma. They give you rolled up. I don't know if they still do this, but what we always got was a copy of The Journalist's Creed, which was written by the school's founder, Walter Williams. And it talks, and in it he says a public journal is a public trust. And I still believe that. If you are in this business and you are a journalist as opposed to an influencer or someone with hot takes, you have an obligation to a community, to a society. And, that's, it's tough when you try to make your life in the nuance, in the gray areas, and in a black and white world where we respond to quick things that get the endorphins flowing. And it's tough. Like I'm confident enough that I did not set out to say something provocative about Caitlin Clark. Right now,
Yeah.
part of it is you know um, with certain subject matters, you can say anything and people are going to immediately react to it. Try to have a nuanced conversation these days about transgender athletes, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
people's blood pressure, no matter how they feel about it, is immediately going to skyrocket. Um, but that's, to me, it's just so important in this job is, what is the honest story? What is the best representation of this? And are you willing to be more boring than you might be in the name of accuracy?
Yeah.
And that to me is a difference between real journalism and a lot of what's out there.
Well, I don't want to give Caitlin all the credit. You also had a great piece, a great clip about Robert Caro and the duty of a journalist, how far you have to go about my horse racing friend who wrote the book about the trainer and the jockey and the spectacular bid. Also, I want to ask you, TJ, what effect is AI going to have on journalists? And are you using it to support your work?
Um, we're starting to in different ways. I mean, it's crazy how inaccurate it can be a lot of times. So as a reporting tool, excuse me, it's a good tool to start with, but you cannot forget the basics of, okay, what's the source for this stuff? How do you vet it? What's accurate? What's not? Um, it is a mess for journalists to navigate. It's a bigger mess for consumers. And if it's a bigger mess for them, if it's a problem for them, that means it's a problem for us. Because people, I had a terrific talk with a good friend of mine the other day who said, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what not to. I don't know what's AI and what isn't. Um, there's a lot of criticism in this country, oh, globally, about mainstream media. And yeah, there are a number of problems with mainstream media. But I know if I read something in ESPN or the New York Times, I've got my own criticisms of them that we don't need to get into, but whatever. Then the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, I know that there is a set of standards that is that is being followed. And yes, they will make mistakes, but I know if I see a video, I know they have gone through a process to vet it. I know if there's a quote from somebody that is an accurate, that it is a quote from that person. Now, sometimes, we get quotes wrong. I'm not saying there's not, but the point is there is a system of standards um, of of fact checking. We're not just throwing it out there. I know sometimes people have that, have that impression that it's you just get anything you can, put it in print right away to the old expression, just to sell newspapers. Um, Look, I worked for a New York City tabloid, like you said, the New York Daily News for a long time. There were some criticisms about our news side, and it could be a little sensationalist sometimes. But what you had was career professional journalists who cared very much about accuracy, and you went through deep rigor for everything that you reported. Um, but you've got a massive gap in trust between the public and all these publications. And how do you bridge that? To me, the answer is not what CBS is doing, which is trying to, I mean, God help them. I don't know what's going on with CBS Evening News and what they're trying to do. This idea that, you know, Tony, what's his name, saying he's going to be more transparent than Walter Cronkite. Like, what are you kidding me? They, we have to do a better job of advocating for ourselves in the business and explaining what it takes to finally get something into print. And, that's like some of the more controversial stories that I've done, especially if it's like something on an athlete like Barry Bonds or somebody who's beloved in a hometown, and I write something that's not flattering about them or just reporting facts about an investigation the fans don't want. I'll almost always go on local radio because they are going to hammer me, but I'm going to get an opportunity to explain what it took to, before we publish that story. Right now, if you are a consumer and you've got a video that shows up, like let's say you've got Instagram or Threads or X or whatever you have, everybody's opinions get reduced to a box about this big. They all look the same. This video looks real. How do I know it's not? How do I know if it's AI? And the danger to me is what I think we've started to see a bit of, where people just abandon the idea that there's any such thing as truth or that it matters. It's not so much who are you believing, who are you not believing. It's the idea that I can't believe in anything and I'm just going to disengage. So what do you do when you're a journalist of the old school who believes in, truth, justice, fairness, uh, honor, stewardship? I think those were the
Yeah.
ones that taught us back in J school. If you believe in that stuff and you believe in those standards, you keep doing it. And what you hope is that when you write it, you've had enough of a reputation and enough support that people think, okay, I'm inclined to believe in it, even if I don't like it. But
Yeah.
part of what we're fighting is humans are built to give in to confirmation bias. We just want news that supports our worldview. Um, and when you can't tell the difference between real journalism and AI slop, you end up with an ignorant society that is disengaged from basic governance. And So that to me is pretty. I don't know if I'm even remotely close to what your question was,
No,
but
you got it. And it's interesting. You mentioned CBS News, and you also mentioned old school journalists. It'll be interesting to see if Margaret Brennan, who is an old school journalist, will survive. It's on CBS with the new leadership, because she does ask the tough questions and she is prepared. And I'm not sure if that's where they want the news to go. Well, tell you what. Let's go to your favorite subject, baseball. It was an amazing baseball season. Otani is as good as anyone could have ever imagined he would be. I think. But before we get to him, the last time we talked, I think you were happy with the rule changes in baseball. Where are we now? Are you still happy? Have they learned to game the new rule changes I think in the 2 years since we talked? So where are those rule changes that we had, I guess, 3 years ago, 3 seasons ago now?
the ones, I mean, the biggest one was the pitch clock
Mhm.
and the difference. And I think when you and I talked, it was I was they had just announced they were going to do it, and I had been watching. Um, uh, I've been spending a lot of time. I think you and I chatted one time about my late uh, dear friend and colleague Pedro Gomez, and his son was in the Red Sox system, and so I'd go to see a bunch of his minor league games, um, and went from one season where there was one game where they were in Hartford, Connecticut, and it was 3 hours 40 minutes, and then the next time they played, they had the pitch clock in effect in the minor leagues, and it was 2 hours and like 15 minutes. And I'm like God, it's a completely different product. This is the game I fell in love with as a kid, and I think we've seen that play out with Major League Baseball. It's been an absolute success. You got a few guys who bristled at first and didn't like the idea. Um, I'm a huge Max Scherzer fan, one because he was a Mizzou guy, but I also just love the way he pitched. And someone like him who was didn't seem too thrilled about it at the beginning, but everybody adjusted, and the product is so much better. Um, with what they've done about stealing bases, limiting how many times a pitcher can disengage. You know, yeah, the fact that Otani became the first 50-50 player, 50 home runs, 50 stolen bases, really kind of means nothing, because once a guy is disengaged twice and now the player knows he can steal with a pitcher not trying to pick him off, um, you can't compare stolen bases, numbers now to what they used to be, but it brought it back to the game. It's more exciting. What they're talking about now with, you know, not sure what's going to happen with realignment. I think some of that's inevitable. Um, but the big thing now would be moving toward automated balls and strikes. And again, I
Absolutely.
saw this watching Pedro's son Rio, who I don't know if anybody's saw earlier when I seemed distracted for a second. It was actually coincidence. It was him calling me. Um,
Oh, that's awesome.
but watching him in AAA, he had a couple games where he was pitching where they would alternate between, some games they would have the automated balls and strikes, and some they didn't. And when they did, yeah, there was a shift in that certain low pitches now were being called, that wouldn't have been a strike before. One thing I think Rob Manfred deserves a lot of credit for is um, they haven't rushed any of these. They play them out in the minor leagues. They
Hmm.
want to see what's going on. They've been very conscientious about really not bringing an idea to the majors until it's fully baked. And you've had several years now of automated balls and strikes. Um, from I think from one standpoint, again, I keep using this word, but it is inevitable. Wherever technology takes us, we will go, right? I mean, replay, once fans had the ability to see whether an umpire or referee's call was right or wrong, it was going to end up part of the game. You can't have only human element when the rest of the world can see that they blew it. And so the technology is going to push us to be as accurate as possible. There is something, you know, when you go to balls and strikes, and it will happen, it absolutely will happen. First of all, you're really not going to notice it one pitch to the next because you still got the umpire back there. You still need somebody directing traffic, a conductor.
Mhm.
Um, but he's just getting, he or she is going to get, electronic notification if it's a ball or strike, and they're still calling it. It's not going to look that different. It'll be different in terms of, for one thing, the accuracy. Um, and you are also, you know, umpires like the fans themselves, they want to get it right. When the issue of instant replay in baseball came up, my colleague Willie Weinbaum and I went out and talked to a bunch of umpires, including Don Denkinger, who St. Louis and Kansas City fans will remember from the '85 World Series. He's the one who blew the call in Game 6 that would have won it for the Cardinals. As a lifelong Mets fan, it was all good with me, but he and also for anybody listening, like, no, his name's Denkinger. No, it's not. Al Michaels got it wrong that night, unfortunately, and it stuck. His name he died recently, Don Denkinger. And we went to his house, and he said, "You think I wanted to be famous for this?" He's like, "There's no way." He said, I would love to see replay. And like, Jim Joyce, terrific career umpire, is known for blowing the call that cost Galarraga a perfect game for the Tigers, and he didn't want to be famous for that. Super, super nice guy. It's going to happen. They want the accuracy. You are going to lose something. It always happens. And I used to love the conversations with players about umpires. Like Tony Phillips, who I loved covering with the White Sox and the Mets. Tony also died a few years ago. Epic personality, scrappy player, fighter his whole career. The conversations he would have with umpires were just, epic, where, guys would say, call a pitch and Tony would scream, "How short do you think I am?" I'm not going to use all the language. This is a family show. I remember going to the ballpark some days and seeing a player would look on that day's lineup card and see who the umpires were and think, "Oh man, so and so is." I mean, this actually happened, but both guys are still alive, so I can't share. I choose not to share the names, but someone who's now a Hall of Fame player looked at the list and saw a certain umpire was going to be behind the plate, and he goes, "Oh God, I didn't send him a drink last night at the strip club." And so he knew part of his plan going into the game was, I better be swinging because if it's close. Now, should that be part of the game? Arguably not. Is it a fun bit of folklore? Yeah. I mean, the umpires, they're not just, men in blue. And I'd say that specifically because now we have, you're going to see, more and more women in it, and they don't just wear blue anymore. And but the old idea of the men of the blue in blue, people I don't think ever appreciated just how much a part of the game they were and what their relationships were with managers and fans. And there was something really kind of cool about that. And that's going to change because now they'll have their moments, they'll have their arguments, they'll still get to eject people, but there was, whether it should survive or not, there was something, part of the folklore was if you were a veteran pitcher and you could spot a strike, you could spot a pitch at 2 inches off the strike zone, but show that you could do it consistently, they would give you that call because you had earned that right. And people in the game respected it and understood it, as long as it wasn't crazy, like with, when Eric Craig was calling, balls this far off the strike zone in the World Series, strikes. But it was kind of the magic of it, the folklore of it. And yeah, and we're going to lose that, but it's just what technology does.
This year in the U.S. Open, I guess Medvedev is his name. There was a controversy where a cameraman went out and got in the way, and I guess the umpire called a let. And they had this big argument and went on for 10, 15 minutes. It was very controversial. But it's interesting because that was the only controversy you ever see in tennis anymore. The whole U.S. Open, all the calls are right. They used to argue about every other call. I mean, that was part of the game. And to be honest with you, I don't think anyone misses it. The game is faster, they play, and we don't have to do that anymore. So it was interesting to have this throwback argument with Medvedev.
Yeah, it's
God, yeah,
no. Look, I never found John McEnroe's rants particularly entertaining myself. I was
right.
kind of a tennis fan. I mean, with Connors and McEnroe and Borg and
Stasi.
Navratilova and Everett. It's I wasn't watching for that. I know, so it's not hockey. You're not looking for the fights.
Yeah.
It's not race, NASCAR where you're looking for the crashes. It's um, I want to see an accurate game. I want to know what the person I'm watching is. I want to see two top athletes playing at the top of their game to the best of their ability to see who's the better person on that day. I don't want it to come down to somebody else's mistake. I don't want that to be a distraction. Yeah, it's part of the folklore, and yes, it can be fun, and um, but it's not the essence of what we do. And if I'm an athlete, I sure want them to get it right.
Yeah. I think we'll look back with nostalgia, but we won't miss it at all. Well, TJ, this has been great as always, but I wanted to end on Otani. Put him in historical perspective. I mean, when you think about Babe Ruth and Willie Mays, um, Hank Aaron, I mean Barry Bonds, if we can add him to the conversation, some of the greatest ever. I mean, and also this season, it's probably got to be one of the best seasons in baseball history.
He, there is an incredible case to be made that he is the best who ever played. There's a huge problem with trying to compare eras. How do you compare it to Babe Ruth? How do you compare it to someone who played in a segregated era? How do you when the best black players could not play the game?
Mhm.
Um, how different would he have been facing some of those pitchers? Where would Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige be in history?
Mhm.
Uh, you know, you've also got such a massive change in preparation in medicine. Um, you know, even what we emphasize in the game, right? It used to be batting average was everything, and then eventually they figured out it's actually not a very good metric to measure a batter's success. OPS is much more accurate. You make mistakes by that comparison, but to see someone who is, to me, clearly the best positioned player in the game, and when he's healthy, has been the best pitcher at times. I mean, the World Baseball Classic 3 years ago, when the championship came down to Shohei Ohtani on the mound versus Mike Trout at the plate, Japan versus the U.S., it was one of the greatest matchups moments I think any of us will, if you care about baseball, but any sport. Two of the best who ever played facing each other like that. Um, and you knew you were looking at two of the best in history. And I think uh, Otani is succeeding in an era where, uh, like, you knew not to throw a fat pitch over the plate for Babe Ruth or for Hank Aaron or whatever. But did you know how he would react to a certain slider and a certain count? You didn't have did you have hit charts, spray charts on where he hits the way they did back then? It took forever to compile this information. Now any 6-year-old with a computer can figure out tendencies. So the training has gotten better. So we know that they're better athletes and they're staying healthier than they were. We know that the scouting now compared to then is simple math compared to calculus. Um, it's harder to do it now than it's ever been because what technology and training do is even the playing field for people. Um, so to me, that makes what Otani's done even more exceptional. Babe Ruth, when he came to the plate, and I'm not dissing Babe Ruth at all.
Yeah.
He's still one of 2, 3 greatest players in the history of the game. But he would see the same pitcher 4 times in a game. You know, nowadays you're lucky if you see one guy twice, and then you've got 2 specialists coming in who are coming in just to get you out.
Mm.
It's why we're never going to see, or very unlikely we'll see somebody hit 400 again unless there's a major change. It's why it's very unlikely we'll see, when Joe DiMaggio did his record of 56 straight games, his hitting streak, he was facing the same guy, most games. There's a huge advantage when you're to the pitcher when they've never faced each other. The game has changed. You can't really compare it straight up. But I know that you know Otani has done things that nobody else has done to be the best pitcher and the best hitter at the same time is just inconceivable. Um, I hope people truly appreciate it. It seems like it was tough because he was on the West Coast, with the Angels, and so he really was kind of getting lost. This gem of a player. Now he's gotten to be on the stage with the Dodgers for two falls in a row, and I think people are starting to understand that. Yeah, this guy, he may be it. I mean, my fascination with him is endless.
What effect has he had on the international uh, um, uh, desire to watch baseball? Is baseball becoming more of an international sport like basketball and maybe maybe even one day soccer because of Otani, or he doesn't have that kind of effect?
Well, I mean, it's pretty limited to I mean, he's massive in Japan, but any Japanese player who came over was massive.
Right.
When Hideo Nomo came, it was uh, the Mets. I covered him for a bit with the Mets. He's one of the most boring human beings I've ever been around. But the fascination, baseball is so big in Japan. So Otani, you know, comes into comes with this legacy of a country that is baseball crazy. Um, Anybody in the DR is going to know who he is. Anybody in Japan or Korea, or even Taiwan, where you've got, very good professional leagues, they're going to be really into him. Is the average French citizen really going to care? I doubt it. Um, Baseball has not had the success with a global reach that, at least in terms of Europe and Africa. Um, you've seen growth in Latin America. There's tremendous interest in a number of Asian countries. Um, it doesn't seem to have quite the appeal that the NBA does, and I think part of it because it's harder to play. Anybody can, all you need is a basketball
Yeah.
and just one hoop really to play it. Baseball, you need space, you need more equipment, it's more specialized. Um, but I think you know baseball has always had a problem of, well, not always, but really more the modern era of having truly national stars. Not a lot of people. There are a lot of places in the country where Mike Trout could walk into a room and a lot of people won't know who he is. That's amazing. This guy's a guaranteed Hall of Famer. Um, Shohei Otani has really broken to that level where now he's okay. This is somebody, he doesn't even speak English, but people just recognize that there's something so excellent about him, that he has become that rare, national figure. I mean, just imagine if he, if he becomes eloquent in English, and I don't know if that's a priority for him. And I'm not saying he needs to, whatever, that's him. Um, but he's got that ability to become that national figure that I don't really know since really Ken Griffey Jr. We've seen somebody who kind of captured the national attention that way.
Wow. Yeah. He seems, I know he had a little gambling scandal, but he seems to be, everyone I know loves him. And I went to a Nats game a few years ago. I mean, he had so many fans there. Everyone had his jersey on, and, lots of, obviously lots of Japanese fans were there as well. But look, TJ, this is great. Always love talking to you, man. Thanks for taking the time. And I hope your family's as well. And look, man, hopefully you'll come back and do this again with me again sometime.
Anytime, anytime. Always enjoy it.
Okay, TJ, have a great day now, man.
You too, man.
Take care. Bye bye.